Hey everybody, welcome to our series on Bootstrap. Whoopsies. Um, what we're going to do is we're going to continue with our third video here, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the grid system works. So if you're on your Get Bootstrap page, we're going to go get started again here, and we're going to scroll down in the right side of the page to our starter template. We're going to go ahead and get that in. And this is our last one here. We're going to just do a new file. And we're going to paste it in. And as we did before, Control A will select all of it. Shift Tab so we can get it to align a little bit better. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to tab everything the way that it should be done here. So it's a full tab, not just two spaces in. If you're a two-space person, that's great. Do it your way, but I'm not going to. So we don't need our H1, but we do need some room in the body as always. And in our title, this will be Bootstrap Grid. We're going to go ahead. I'm just going to save this right here real quick. And this will be our third file, so I'll save it as that. You can just save it as BS Grid is probably what I would do. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to divide our page. Into the different sections that you should. Header, nav, and then we'll put our container, our div with a class of container, and then our footer. And again, those are just placeholders for right now. More to come in that later when you're designing actual pages. So in our container is where all of our code is going to go. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how this grid works out. So in the Get Bootstrap page, I believe the grid here would be if we go to Layout. They talk a little bit about container and then a whole bunch of information here. And there's a whole link right here for the grid system. Now it gets very, very wordy. But if you want the full story, this is definitely where to go to get the full story. So to start it off here, we're just going to go ahead and do a new row. Div with a class of row. And with Bootstrap, I find it always to be best to make sure that you comment your closing div tags. We're just going to say this is the end of row 1. So when we get a bajillion and a half div tags, we know what's what. And inside of our row here, we're just going to go ahead and do a couple of cards. We don't need all the tags. In this one, what we'll just do is we'll just do a header. Card dash header. And then we'll just do a little bit of card text. And that should be enough. So let's go ahead and just do a quick preview, make sure that we're set to go. Yep, and it definitely doesn't look like much right now, but it should be enough to kind of do the trick to show what the grid works out as. So the grid, what they do is they divide into 12 sections. So for our card here, for our row, if we add col -12, what should happen is that this, as opposed to being what that is right now, will go ahead and stretch the entire width of the column. It'll take up all 12 of the segments that the screen is divided into. If we change that to cowl-6, if you have 12 sections and you take up 6 of them, that will be exactly half of your row. So we'll leave it at 6 right now. So let's go ahead and comment the close of our card. And we'll put, if we have 12 and we take up 6, that would leave 6 left for our next. So if we do 2 cards that take up 6 of our segments, we should get 2 cards in a row. In our next row, let's go ahead and we'll put one more row on here. And we'll say that this is, of course, a class of row. And we'll comment the close. And this is our second row, therefore it's going to be the end of row 2. Now we're going to cheat here. We're not going to retype all the card stuff. We're just going to take our card and we're going to copy it. And if you notice, I like to leave an empty space between just to make it easier to see. So if we do cowl-4, we should then mathematically be able to put 3 cards in a row. So we can have each one of those cards taking up 4 of the 12 available sections. So that's the basic way that the grid would work out. You could change that. Obviously, 6 is half, 4 is a third, 3 you could fit 4 cards across. I'm assuming that you can do the basic math and probably figure that out. So now is when it gets to be a little bit different, though. So in our next row, in our row 3, whoops, wrong thing. Div with a class of row again. Then we'll comment the end. There have additional things that you can add. So we're going to add in our card here, and what we're going to do is we're going to say that this one is in the larger screen size. Cowl LG is going to take up 6, but SM 12. So on the smaller screen size, it will take up the entire screen. On the larger, it will then take up 6. So let's see if we can make this work here. So at this larger screen size, you see that's half. But if you go and you reduce the screen size, you see that where it actually goes and it changes, it responds to the screen size. And now it takes up the entirety, that bottom row. And then the breakpoint is when it changes. So this is one of the ways that you can make your Bootstrap be a little bit more responsive. And as a web designer, you definitely have to be conscious of this, because most people are going to view your websites on a phone to start with. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to take this additional one. We're going to put one more in here. And just to differentiate this a little bit, for our header here, We're going to go ahead and add BG dark and text white to both of those. I should have done that before I copied it, I guess. Oh well. Just so we can differentiate and so we can see. So in our preview, the row we're talking about here, our responsive row, has the darker header. When we reduce the size of the page, we go from it splitting the column, splitting the row, to then stacking up. So on a phone screen, it would definitely look a little bit better like that, because as you can see, the rows above, those are getting really small, whereas these are definitely a much better size. So in these, you can actually do a medium size as well, but I think probably 2 is a good way to go. So if you plan to do a larger and a smaller, then it just generally will work out for you. So that's our cards. That's our the way that our grid system is going to work. You have rows organized in rows, and then you specify how many columns each will take up. Stay tuned for one more in our series coming up.